to the ADA, I can do that. Analyst.
All right. Good afternoon. Good evening, everybody. Thank y'all so much for joining us. Thank y'all again for being here. This is our third series in our third actual virtual town hall in our series. I am Crystal Spain, the chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party, and I am joined here tonight with our former U.S. Attorney, Adair Ford Burroughs, and our current U.S. State Rep, Jermaine Johnson. And tonight, this conversation is going to be centered around civil rights and diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is a huge topic right now. We're seeing a lot of damage being done across the country, coming from Washington, D.C., as well as things happening here at our State House. And it's important for us to try to provide as much factual information as possible. So I'm really delighted that Adair and Representative Johnson have decided to join us tonight. So I'm going to introduce Ms. Adair Ford Burroughs, our former U.S. Attorney and a former candidate for Congress in 2020. She ran in the Congressional District number 2 against our current Congressman Joe Wilson.
Yes. Thank you all. I think this is obviously an important topic right now, and how to hold up our values in the current environment and context. And so one thing that I think is really important, I get a lot of questions about the current executive orders on DEI and how that relates to the law. First, I want to say I'm not giving legal advice, and the party is not giving legal advice, but I am giving information on these things and what's out there. And so the first thing I would like to tell everyone is if you actually read the text of these orders, they talk about illegal DEI, and specifically DEI that violates federal law. So they are not banning DEI in a holistic way. They're banning DEI that, quote, violates federal law. That means violates the Civil Rights Act of 1964. If it was illegal 2 years ago, it's illegal now. And so those executive orders did not change federal law about what was legal and not legal. And I think that's really important before people start freaking out, changing things out of fear without knowing kind of what the law is. What has emboldened the administration right now is a 2023 Supreme Court case it was brought against Harvard College, having to do with admissions and race-conscious admissions to the college. And before that case, Supreme Court had said it's totally fine to consider race. Quotas illegal, set preferences illegal, but you can consider race as a plus factor when you're trying to build diverse student bodies, because there's value in diverse student bodies. In 2023, the Supreme Court overturned that, and they said you can't consider race at all. And so that was a big change, and the administration is looking for ways that case can impact, that they think they can take that case and argue other things that we might be doing in this space could possibly violate equal protection and when we're race conscious. And so later, if you want to talk about those, and like Department of Education's Dear Colleague letters or the EEOC letters, and what things they might attack, I'll just go ahead and give you a heads up. It's stuff like scholarships that say only people of certain races can apply, employee resource groups that are limited to people of a particular protected class. Those are the things that they're going after. But you cannot, a lot of what you might term DEI is protected by the First Amendment and other things. And so they cannot actually make all of DEI illegal. And I just want to put that out front on the federal side. So
Perfect. Thank you so much. Representative Johnson.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for tuning in this evening. I'm Jermaine Johnson, House District 52, and I know a good bit about this diversity, equity, and inclusion situation that we're facing right now, not only on a state level, but a federal level. And what has happened essentially over the past, few months is we have seen this attack on this acronym. They've created this acronym of DEI, and they've used that acronym to create a new boogeyman. And we know in South Carolina, we like to create boogeymen, y'all. We know that. All right. The boogeyman was CRT one year. Then another year, the boogeyman was LGBTQ people. And then the boogeyman is pregnant women. You know, we like to create boogeymen here in South Carolina. So this year, the boogeyman is diversity, equity, and inclusion, the acronym DEI. And they've scaled it back to that acronym just so that they can utilize something where it doesn't actually mean anything, because we know the definitions of diversity, equity, and inclusion are not bad. We know that. So when this bill came up, the very first bill that was introduced, it was a horrible, 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 far-reaching bill. It was probably one of the worst bills that I've ever seen introduced here in this state. And with that bill, it would have cost the state $86 million. $86 million. And that was a report that was released. It was in the state newspaper. But even prior to that report being released, I was taking some of my Republican colleagues one by one, having one-on-one meetings with these Republican colleagues of mine to explain to them the breakdown and the far-reaching effects that this bill would have on all South Carolinians, not just Democrats, not just Black people or LGBTQ or any of their boogeyman folks, but them as well and their family members. And I sat down with them and I explained to them and I showed them in the text where this would affect their people. And to nobody's surprise, at least not to my surprise, they had no idea what was even in the bill themselves. They didn't even know what was in the bill. They did not know how it was going to affect them. They didn't know how bad the bill was. They didn't know any of this type of stuff. And when I had to show them, it was the first time they had ever even read the bill when I showed it to them. And they were surprised, obviously. And then some of them even said they didn't even know how their name ended up on the bill. They had no idea how the name even ended up on the bill. And I'm like, well, wow, this is ridiculous. Like, this is crazy. What, are you a serious legislator? Like are you serious about your job? So, you know, and that was my concern. So after that happened and that report came out, that's when they decided to rewrite that bill. And they rewrote it. And then they put it into the budget proviso. They introduced it in the budget proviso. And when it got in there, I knew that was coming up. I knew it was probably going to pass. It was going to happen. But the thing that got to me was when Representative Annie McDaniel, when she stood up and she raised a point of order about that proviso being put into the budget. And she put up two amendments. One was about merit-based and non-merit-based admittance into institutions. And the other one was about banning public funds from going to white supremacy programs. And when the white supremacy programs one came up, this is the one where, you know, most of y'all have probably seen the video that went viral about me calling them out and calling them what they were to their faces. Because when that amendment came up, I thought in my heart of hearts that somebody would have stood up and denounced white supremacy in this state.
You were disappointed.
And I was extremely disappointed because we just had the Patriot Front on the steps of the State House. We just had that.
And who's the Patriot Front?
That is that racist white supremacist organization. And you can liken them to the KKK. Mm-hmm. And because we just had that, I thought that somebody was going to stand up and speak for me or speak for my family or speak for you all who are watching right now. Nobody said anything. The silence was deafening. And my body just filled with rage. I was so angry. I was so mad. I jumped up and ran to the front. And they was like, calm down, Jermaine, calm down, calm down, calm down. Because they knew I was ready to go off on everybody. And that's when I gave that impassioned speech. But what you did not see from that video is after I got done speaking, I walked out the back room and I went outside to the back steps of the State House. And I sat there and I cried. And I'm gonna be honest, I sat there and I cried. And I cried because of the letdown that our people in this state are feeling, that the people in this country are feeling, the voiceless people in this country right now. They felt like they don't have anybody speaking up for them. And I felt just like that at that moment.
And they don't.
And I cried. And they came outside, some of my colleagues came outside, they said, Jermaine, we won. And I'm like, what are you talking about? They said they pulled the proviso out of the budget. They pulled the proviso out of the budget. They came to me and they said, listen, we made a mistake. We should not have done that. It was in poor taste, and we'll rewrite something different. This is what happened.
That was a mistake.
That was a mistake. And that's how that bill got rewritten again to what we currently have today, which is the bill and the language that Adair was just talking about just now about violating the Civil Rights Act. But we still have work to do, y'all, and I'm sure we'll get into more of that discussion going on this evening.
Perfect. Thank y'all so much for being here again. So we did a call for questions and we got dozens of questions back. And so I've got my laptop here and I'm going to thread through some of the previous submitted questions, I think from yesterday, but you still can drop questions in the chat. I can see them on my laptop here. So if you don't hear your question answered or you have a question while we're having this conversation, please put it in the chat. So this question is from Angie from Lexington County, and I'm going to pose it to both of you. Is there any current litigation from South Carolina challenging this executive action? So I assume she's talking about DEI. If not, what discipline, school, civil rights, women in business, etc., would you suggest to be the most successful in challenging the order if brought to suit? So grateful for your time and willingness to educate us.
So yeah, there's one suit challenging executive orders right now in South Carolina. It was filed in federal court in Charleston by a large number of nonprofits, and it's challenging 3 different executive orders based on grant funding. So there were 3 executive orders that were pulling and cutting grant funding for stuff. One of them included in his anti-DEI executive order, one of the things he said is to cancel all equity-related grants. What does that mean?
Thank you.
No one knows what that means. And so that's happening. There's a lot of nonprofits that are plaintiffs in that case that receive funding from the federal government, and they've actually amended and added others. If you receive money from the federal government, that's a good place to look. There was another challenge to it in Maryland that's important for our purposes because we go to the same appellate court. So I think that will affect it. But one of the challenges made in the Maryland suit was that equity related is unconstitutionally vague, like nobody knows what that means. But the challenge here, they've made a lot of challenges based on APA and some other rights, which is the Administrative Procedures Act. So that one was filed in late March and would be one to follow. They have not, that's all about grant funding though. And so if you have to file a lawsuit, you have to have something called standing, which the simplified version of it is you have to be the one harmed. So these are all nonprofits that are looking at losing funding. And so if you have been harmed in any way by these executive orders, please do talk to a lawyer because that's what that would give you the ability to sue.
Yeah, currently, I don't know anything on a state level, state specific. Of course, we have not passed any of those bills yet. So I would imagine that, after they pass something, that there was going to be lots of lawsuits that are going to be coming down. Probably the ACLU will probably be first and foremost at the front line of that. But currently, I haven't seen anything from a state specific level. But, the thing that has angered me the most is that we don't have a bill passed. We don't have anything like that done that is currently set in law, but yet our institutions are already implementing these changes before we've even enacted anything. And I think that's a problem. I think what they're trying to do is show good faith or show this. But if you're watching and you see the Supreme Court, if you're looking at the different courts, they're all ruling against them. Like they're all saying like, no, we're upholding this, or we need to uphold that, or this was a mistake here, or this shouldn't have gone this way. And yet our institutions are still just following along this dictator. And I think that I think our institutions and our departments need to slow down a little bit and wait for these things to actually happen before we start implementing these changes.
That's what I'd say too. I agree. Just take a breath. Take a breath before you make big changes. Because the way things are portrayed in the news is not actually the text of the law. Right. And so before you start upending institutional programs,
yes.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So we got another question here. Kate from Spartanburg County. My adult son is autistic and receives support services from the Charles Lee Center in Spartanburg. How will the elimination of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility practices, as well as custom Medicaid, affect the ability of the South Carolina Department of Disabilities and Special Needs to fulfill its mission? Will South Carolina DDSN even continue to exist under the current federal administration? I'll send that to you, Representative.
Well, that question, essentially, as long as the bill stays in its current written form, you don't have to worry about too much. Now, if it reverts back to the initial writing of this bill, because you got to understand that it is passed the House, but it has not passed the Senate. It's currently in the Senate, and it's in the Judiciary Committee over in the Senate. So what I would suggest is that if I were you all, along with myself, because I'm doing the same right now, is to start lobbying your senators about this bill to make sure that essentially they don't make it worse. You know, because if it's currently the way that it's currently written, you have to violate the Civil Rights Act of 1964 for this to actually be a situation. So DDSN would not violate that statute. It would not violate anything like that. So essentially, you have nothing to worry about unless this bill reverts back to what it was initially written as. But you should be okay.
So say the ADA still applies, and you cannot change the ADA by executive order or by state legislation because federal law trumps. And so all of the ADA protections that currently exist will continue to exist until Congress changes them.
Right.
And so that will be true for all disability rights.
Perfect. So you just answered Robin's question from Jasper County about ADA. So I won't ask it.
Okay.
Well, I'll do it since Robin submitted it. Robin from Jasper County, how will the potential elimination of DEI programs affect ADA?
It will not affect the ADA.
Perfect.
And all the executive orders also have a line in there that says nothing in this order will violate law. It's a savings clause so that they don't lose in court. So courts say, actually, they won't do anything that violates the law. So we're going to interpret this executive order as consistent with ADA. This is the way that will work. Yeah.
Okay, this question I'm going to get is for Adair. Leslie from Beaufort County, Trump signed an executive order dismantling DEI programs in the military. How will this affect people currently serving and veterans?
Yeah, so that's actually a big one. So there are certain places where the executive has a lot more authority than others, and the military is one of them as commander-in-chief. He has not only banned DEI, he has also his gender identity orders apply to the military, and he's essentially excluded transgender people from military service, which is a huge effect. There is a lawsuit about that. So that I think will be a huge effect. It will affect recruiting. It will affect, in this case, care that transgender people receive. They're not going to receive gender affirming care. And you're going to see I can't imagine that it would not affect culture and the military to pull out the programs that they have. So that's a place where the executive does have a lot of authority. And I think you will see impacts there.
Okay. Nicole from Richland County, how will you ensure that state policies and practices actively promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, particularly for marginalized communities?
Well, it's essentially just making sure that they don't do anything worse, with this bill, and making sure that nothing else comes down the pipeline. And I don't foresee them doing it. They realize that the world is watching them right now. And the funny thing about it is the worst thing you can call a racist is a racist. And they hate to be called a racist. So when you call them a racist and you show them that their actions are being racist, they want to do something that shows that they're not racist. That shows that they're not racist. So what do you do to show that you're not racist? Well, let's start bringing up things that are consistent with African Americans, and let's put more money in the marginalized community. Let's do something that can be contrary to what it would be seen as being a racist. And coincidentally, it's funny that right after they passed that DEI bill, guess whose bill started getting hearings the next week? Black people. Black legislators' bills started getting hearings the next week. Hey,
they had not been any hearings.
We hadn't got no hearings, but now that we're getting hearings all of a sudden, right? Very coincidental, very coincidental, right? So it's like, oh, don't call us a racist. We're not racist. We're going to bring your bill up and say, hey, we care about you. Be a part of the process. But make no mistake about it, y'all. Please don't misunderstand this. They have a super majority in South Carolina. I have to say that again because people are not understanding. They have a super majority in South Carolina, not only in the House, not only in the Senate, but every statewide position that is out there, they occupy it. So what that means is if they wanted to pass a bill tomorrow, they could. If they wanted to make something law tomorrow, they could. They could do that. Now, of course, there'll be legal challenges and that type of stuff, but if they wanted to do it, they could. That also means if they want to fix your roads, they could. If they wanted to fix public education, they could. If they wanted to make your groceries a little bit more affordable, they could. If they wanted to make housing available, they could. If they wanted to show the respect to everybody, they could. They have the power to do so. And now it is time for us to hold them accountable. And we have to do that by organizing and showing up. And I'm gonna get more into this other thing I came up with earlier, but I don't want to get into it right now. I'm getting a little worked up thinking about how angry this stuff makes me.
All right, perfect. Okay, Hunter from Newberry County. You have your
No.
Hunter from Newberry County. What are the next steps that need to be taken when one branch of government ignores the authority of another branch of government? For example, the president not carrying out a direct order from the U.S. Supreme Court, or the president mandating compliance with his opinion in order to receive taxpayers' money for grants, research, et cetera.
Yeah, so I am coming to the bias of this in that I'm a lawyer, and when you have a hammer, you like to hammer things. But I also very much believe that the courts are the institution in our separation of powers that can save us now, because Congress is not wanting to buck the president. And so that's why we have courts, and that's why we have lifetime appointees, because he can't fire them. Mm-hmm. And that's why they are appointed for life, even if they make him upset. And so it's an interesting thing the way our government is set up, because the courts don't have access to a military or whatnot to enforce court orders, but that they do have is a contempt power. And we have seen that used in civil rights stuff and historically in order to get court orders complied with. Here in South Carolina and during the civil rights movement, and Briggs v. Elliott, and in other cases, there's the white primary case that we had in Charleston here during the civil rights movement, where African Americans were not allowed to vote in the primary. And the federal judge in that case said, if you don't follow my order, I have two options in my contempt power. I can issue fines and I can send people to jail for lack of compliance, and there will be no fines. And it's like, there will be no fines on court record. And so that's the weapon or tool that the courts have to enforce compliance, is if they hold someone in contempt for failing to follow a court order, then they have the power to imprison someone until they comply, or to issue fines until they comply, or issue other types of sanctions for failure to comply with the court order. And that, I think, is where we're about to see some of that come to a head. And, one of the questions I have is how much will, the Supreme Court really back up the rule of law and the requirement to follow legal orders. So we shall see.
Yeah, we gotta wait and see.
Yes, Lord.
All right, Deborah from Greenville County. What can we do when our South Carolina representatives and senators are in Trump's pockets and they won't stand up to all the illegality we are seeing? We have no representation that will fight for the people, as the House and the Senate are controlled by Trump's acolytes.
That's a fantastic question, and I say it's a fantastic question because I'm gonna put the power back on the people. Yeah. I'm gonna put the responsibility back on the people, and I'm gonna tell you this, and this is my honest opinion: we have become lazy activists. We have become lazy activists. We will talk about it on the internet. We will sit at home. We will talk to our best friend on the phone, but we won't actually do anything. We won't show up. We won't go to the event. It's like, and we have become some individuals who, if it's convenient for you, then I'll do it. If this is the speaker, I'm going. But if this ain't the speaker, I'm not going tonight. If this is the candidate, I'll donate. But if this ain't the candidate, I won't donate. If this is the location of it, but if Beyonce's performing, I can't go. We have become so lazy in our activism. And it has caused so much of a problem across the state. I can scream from the top of my lungs. I can go as viral as you want to go. I can do all these different types of things. But if I don't have a bunch of people standing behind me, I am so ineffective. I can't do anything without the people standing behind me. So do you know your neighbors? Do you know the people who are next door to you? Do you know the people that are in your groups? Do you know these people? Or are you just sitting behind a desk all day long and saying, I hope it gets better? We have to get away from those being a lazy activist, and we have to start showing up and speaking out and attending and being a part of the change that we want to see. And that's why I do so much that I do. I go into the schools and talk to the kids. I'm out in the communities. I'm picking up trash. I believe if you lead a community, you should be cleaning up that community. I get out there and clean it up. You have to be involved. You have to do these things, because if we're not, then people are going to continue doing what they've already done. And if you think about it, the way we currently draw our district lines right now is based on how many Black people are living in an area. I want you to think about that. We draw our district lines based on how many Black people live in an area. Now, how long that is going to still be able to be effective, I don't know. But currently, right now, the way it is that's how they do it. So if you are living in a white affluent area and you consider yourself a Democrat, 9 times out of 10, your neighbors are Republican. Do you know your neighbors? Are you talking to your neighbors about what's going on? Do they see what you see? Are they, do they care about you? Are you trying to talk to these people? Are you speaking to the heart of these individuals to let them know what's going on out here? That is what we need to do. We need to hold these individuals accountable, and you need to show up and make these people understand what's important to you in your community.
Yeah, that's you said a mouthful, and the bottom line is you have to get involved. And as he said, activism is more than online activism. There's lots of things that we can do here to help you guys get to know your neighbors. So if you want to get involved, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Kristen at SCDP.org.
Also, when you hear calls to contact your representatives, there are differences between filling out an online form and calling and asking to meet with someone in person.
Right.
And if you have the time to show up and take the time to show up and meet in person, it's more impactful. Now, do your reps get the number, like your US rep gets the number of people that submitted something on email? Yeah, they get a number, like this many people submitted something. But if you make a appointment to talk to staff here on the ground in the district or in DC, if you're there, if you make the time to make an appointment to see your actual rep, if they are a Republican and different party from you, but you are one of their voters, and you get to talk to them, and that relationship, not to like harass them, but to just talk to them human being to human being, the efficacy of that versus sitting behind a computer to contact yourself is very, very different. And I think that's something, I think you hear people say, well, I've contacted my rep, now what? I was like, but are you making a personal connection with your representative, or did you send an email? And that matters.
Yeah, I want to add a little bit more to that, because I definitely get contacted by my Republican constituents, and I meet with them. And I meet with them when they want to talk about abortion rights. I meet with them and talk to them about it. Say, hey, listen, let's talk about it. Whatever they want to talk about, I meet with them all the time. We need to be doing the same. Yeah. We absolutely need to be doing the same and calling on our representatives to show up and do the right thing. Think about the civil rights movement. They were so effective because they were strategic and organized, and nobody jumped off the boat. They all said, listen, we're gonna walk for 366 days. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna walk for and that's gonna be it. I might wear the soles of my shoes. I might be tired, but this is what we're gonna do, because this is the calling, this is the movement. And right now we are literally at war. That's what's happening. We are under attack right now. We have a dictator who was even trying to defy the courts. When you're defying the courts and the Constitution, you have become a dictator. You have become a king. And will the people allow this king to continue to rule the way that he's been ruling?
100%. And so you guys have answered some questions that popped up in the chat from Amy and Beth about what other actions we can take. And like Adair said, making phone calls, writing letters, protesting, all those things are good too. But that in-person activism, showing up, as Representative Johnson said, that's going to be paramount. I think that, they've already said it. We're under siege. And we had a previous town hall a couple of weeks ago with Governor Martin O'Malley, who was the former head of the Social Security Administration, and he was very blunt. As he said, we're being robbed. Like someone has broken in and they're robbing us. And what are we going to do about it?
That's right.
What are we going to do about it? And so those are some of the things that you can do right now. But outside of voting, just to go further into to this question, elections are happening all the time. If you live in a town or a city, you have an election coming up this year, or you might have already missed it. They are happening all the time, and we're working hard to post all those things on our website. So you've got to vote locally as well. These folks, a lot of these crazy Republicans come from these small towns and cities.
Yep.
They get elected to the little town council, then the next thing you know, you're calling them governor.
Yep.
So you have to stop them on the very, very local level before they ascend to power. But I kind of want to shift gears here a little bit. We had a question about South Carolina and Doge that came through the chat, and I'm trying to find it. But basically, okay, Jack says, how do we, I guess he's trying to say, how do we stop the state level attempts to replicate the Doge?
Well, first, I'm gonna be honest, why do we want to stop it? I'm gonna ask that question. Why do we want to stop it? And
I had to read that wrong.
and when you talk about, we're talking about Doge right now, right? So you have Doge on the federal level, and if you have it on the state level, Doge. South Carolina has been ran, and I'll go back to that supermajority thing. They have been ran over 20 years by themselves. By themselves. They have just put out a statement a week ago about ending the earmarks that they were doing, which is considered community reinvestment dollars. They will essentially just be investigating themselves.
Yes.
So that's all Doge is going to do is investigate what they have been illegally spending money on, what they have wasted money on, what they have controlled, what they have done. That's all Doge is going to do. And so that's why you have not seen a big push from the moderate Republicans to say, hey, let's go ahead and implement this, because they know it's just going to expose themselves. And because they've been in power for so long, you're going to uncover a lot of skeletons. So, I mean, hey, listen, if you want to have at it, go for it. And I've told them all the time, you can go to my Twitter. I've gotten to it with a lot of the Republicans on Twitter. I say, listen, if you want to do it. If you do it, I dare you, do it. And they're like, oh, no, but no. Then they start backtracking. And I say, yeah, because you know the real outcome of this. So stop acting, stop putting on these performative politics, and stand up for what's right. Do what's right. Stop this mess, and let's do what we need to do to make sure South Carolinians are living better. So, hey, listen, they want to do it, do it.
Anything you want to add about Doge? So Laura, Chanticleer County, what protection do international college students attending South Carolina universities from being deported? Are there certain profiles that they're going after? They are going after.
So not a lot is the answer. There have been in news reports, I think both USC and Furman have stated they have students that have had visas revoked. The F1 visas, which is what most of the student visas are completely discretionary. So there's not recourse as far as like having those revoked. However, there have been students that have sued over being removed from the database, which now I'm forgetting the name of it, CVIS database. And so, which this is kind of super technical, but the actual visa is a separate issue from being in this database. And the way some universities are finding out that something has happened to their student status is that they've been deleted from this database. And so the student have not been notified by the federal government the visa has been revoked. They actually don't know if their visa is revoked. They just know they're not in this database. And so there's a student in Vermont, a PhD student, that has filed suit, not contesting the visa revoke because that's discretionary, but contesting the Department of Homeland Security taking them out of this database, which has effects on their ability to finish their degree and finish work. So there is some court challenges on that. None have been to fruition yet. And, I think that there is some interest from some nonprofits to maybe bring some of those cases on behalf of students here, but they don't know who they are. And so I might help connect people if you know people who are in that situation. As far as what they're targeting, the federal government has refused to say what rubric they're using or how they're targeting. some,
Picking people about the street randomly.
well, they refuse to say what they're using based on, there are now people tracking everyone where it's been reported. There have been a couple patterns that look like they're coming out. One of them is if you have a minor infraction of any kind, like a traffic violation or a DUI or something, they're going back. If that's ever happened, it looks like people might be pulling. It looks like, but again, we don't know because they won't say who we're pulling, but it has seemed to have been impacted students who've participated in pro-Palestinian protests. Might being targeted, we don't know because they won't say what they are. But the protections there, when you're here just on a visa, like it's hard, there's not a lot of protections. And I think anyone here on a visa should be talking to an immigration attorney. I don't know if you saw, but just recently, there was a permanent resident who showed up for their interview, for their final interview for citizenship naturalization.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Arrested.
Oh, yeah.
I saw that.
And so I would be at a point that, you know, if you're here on visa status, or if you're in any status that is a non-citizenship status, before you interact with the federal government, which is a scary thing to say, like you should be talking to someone. You don't want to show up for an interview without an attorney knowing you're there and being able to immediately file a habeas in case you don't come out of the building. It's scary,
Weird.
right?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Jesus.
There's a question about how to get involved. Kristen will put the emails in the chat, but we have two staff that work in Party Affairs, Walter and Kristen, and their emails will be in the chat. So Kristen, please do that quickly. But while we're talking about the deportation, there's a question from Patrick from Greenwood County. Does federal law 22 USC 1732 impose a duty and responsibility upon a U.S. president to effectuate the release of an American wrongfully detained by a foreign country? And if so, does that federal law require the U.S. president to effectuate the release of Kilmar Garcia from his wrongful imprisonment in a foreign country in protection of Mr. Garcia's civil rights?
So that statute 1732, it only applies to U.S. citizens, and Mr. Garcia is not a U.S. citizen. There has never been a time in our country when I think the distinction between citizenship and non-citizenship has mattered so much. And because there's a lot more executive authority in the non-citizenship and foreign relations area. So no, that statute would not apply in Mr. Garcia's stuff, because it's called the Hostage Act. It's where if another country takes American citizen hostage, is like the president should try and effectuate the release. The statute actually has a lot of discretionary languages, and when U.S. citizens have tried to use it, or family of U.S. citizens have tried to use that statute to force a president to do something, they've not, because the president gets to make decisions like, are you wrongfully withheld? The court doesn't get to make that call. But yeah, so that I would say public pressure is a better fulcrum for that.
Perfect. And I don't know if Kristen can put the emails in the chat. We're in a webinar style Zoom, but Kristen's email is kristin@scdp.org, and Walter is Walter, WALTER @scdp.org. And here lost my place really quickly. We had another question in the chat from Pam. Pam says, and I think this is to your earlier response about calling your representatives and setting up appointments. She says, what do we say? How do we not sound stupid? I'm angry about so many things. And I just lost my place. Sorry.
Well, no, well, I can already start addressing some of that.
What is the most important message? And what is the most important message?
Yes, the most important message is, what's the most important message to you? And that's what they need to know. What is important to you and your family and the individuals in your neighborhood? When Chris just talked about sounding stupid, I'll tell you a story that was told to me. Before I even ran for office, I was told by our former mayor here, Steve Benjamin. He said, Jermaine, the first day you get up there, you're going to be in the top 10% of everybody that's up there. I said, Steve, stop lying to me, man. There's no way. I said, this guy been up to 20, 30 years up there. He said, Jermaine, I'm serious. I'm telling you the truth. You're going to be in the top 10% of everybody up there. I didn't believe him until I got up there. Don't be afraid about sounding stupid. Don't be afraid about sounding dumb or not knowing certain things. A lot of these individuals who are elected right now, they were just the most popular person in their area, or they had the most money to pay for their popularity. And that's what allowed them to essentially gain that seat. And they have staff. On the Senate, they actually have personal aides that do a lot of their work. They have staff in these committee meetings. They have staff. So it makes them seem like they know a lot more than what they actually do. All right. So you will know about as much as they know on any particular subject. Before your meeting, they might even go read the bill themselves because they hadn't even read the bill. All right. So you might be more educated on a subject than they are. So don't be afraid to go in there and just let them know how you feel about a certain topic, certain situation. And all your information, you go up in there, make sure you're taking notes or recording the meeting or whatever, if it's okay to record the meeting, because you're going to have to fact check some of these individuals. They like to twist words and make it seem like, something's not happening or something is happening. Make sure you do that and read the bills for yourself. Everybody that's watching right now, you need to go on your phone right now and download the SC Legislator app. All right, when you go on there, you can track this certain pieces of legislation. You can just click notify me for updates on that piece of legislation. So every time that bill gets a hearing or moves or does something, you will get a notification on your phone. You can watch our sessions live on that app as well. Anything you want to know, you can learn your representative's voting record. You can see how many days they've missed, or you can know about their sponsored legislation. That is how you can essentially get involved, and that's really a cheat code to knowing what's going on at the State House.
I'll also say at the federal level, one thing I do want to say, so it doesn't look like Congress is ready to push back, but word on the street is there is back channel conversations. And there are times when Congress has gotten so many calls that there are back channel conversations and the administration will back off on something. Like, I don't know, maybe pause a tariff. And some of those stories, if you have a story where you're like, my boss said we're going to have to do X, Y, and Z because of these tariffs. If you have a story about anything affecting your personal life, your representatives should know that. If like your kid's best friend is now not going to be at college because this is if you have something where it's affecting you on the ground, I think that's really important to make sure your representatives know that it is affecting people in their district on their ground in this way. And don't be afraid to call Congress because you're like, oh, well, they're not going to do anything. There is still back channel conversations to try and check some of the stuff, but it only happens when Congress gets enough pushback from their constituents in their district. And so even if they will not publicly contradict him, they are making calls and saying, look, you got to pull this back.
That's right. That's
an important thing to remember.
So I'm catching up, but that just answered Marie's question. I have made many calls to our U.S. senators and reps through the 5 Calls app. I've not met with them personally and don't know any other callers who have met in person. Do you think these calls are making any difference? And I think you just answered that they do make a difference. And I think we can also look back to what, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, when Senator Booker filibustered. He read a lot of the emails and a lot of the messages that his office had received, and those were those stories that were happening on the ground in his district. And here's a question, I guess, for the SCDP. Many of us have asked repeatedly, but our national representatives refuse to have town halls. They put us on a waiting list. Can the SCDP organize town halls with symbolic empty chairs for our representatives? As that has been a very effective tactic in other states. And the answer is yes. We just released yesterday, we're doing 2 town halls, and Congressman Clyburn is going to be the member for us down in Beaufort on next Thursday, the 24th, and up in Spartanburg next Tuesday, the 22nd. So we are having in-person town halls next week. Please go to our website or Mobilize to sign up so you can get the location. Yeah, I'm trying to catch up, y'all. Y'all putting so many questions in the chat very quickly. Let's see. Some of this stuff.
Do this. There was a Save Act one, right?
Yeah, do you have it? Let me see. Here we go. That was it.
Number 3.
Number 3. Okay, let's do that one.
Yeah.
From Dorchester County. When I married, I dropped my middle name and made my maiden name my middle name. I provided all necessary documents when I got married, when I got my real ID driver's license. Will I be able to vote using my license? I have not, I don't have and can't afford a passport. I'm so sick of all this madness.
So this is the SAVE Act, and I thought this was an important question because it's also a place where it's not yet law, and even if it becomes law, there's implementation at the state level that really requires participation to like make this better and easier for people to vote. So this is the SAVE Act. It's passed the House. It has not passed the Senate. I would first like to say it passed the U.S. House last session and it died in the Senate. So now is the time to let your senators know. Married women that have changed their names, I am one of them. Let your senators know you don't like this. It's a problem. To answer the technical question on voting, the IDs that are allowed by the Act, were it to pass, that would definitely allow you to register to vote is one, a U.S. passport. And Terry noted here, U.S. passports cost like $160. It's a problem. The second is you can show, so real ID is in there, but real ID only if it says your citizenship or your place of birth. Our real IDs do not show citizenship or place of birth. So the South Carolina real IDs not.
It's supposed to be like something on a national.
Right.
Everything was going to be the same.
Yeah.
But for it to count, the real ID. Now, could the state change their real ID to include citizenship or include place of birth? They could, but that is not the case. And the real ID will not count unless the ID says one of those two things. So if I'm using a state ID that does not have that, I can use a state ID like a driver's license with a birth certificate, with a hospital record of birth, with adoption, with a naturalization document if you're naturalized. But then that presents the problem that we're talking about. My birth certificate doesn't match my driver's license. So what happens? So what happens in that instance, and this is important, should this become law, is that if there's a discrepancy in your documents, the language of the bill says the state, each individual state, will establish a process where you can provide additional documentation to resolve it. Okay? So in some cases, maybe a state will say, okay, show me your marriage license, and that will be sufficient. What that process looks like is done by the state election commission. There's also another provision in the statute that says for people that don't have documentation or don't have this, the state has to set up some other process to say, okay, how do you prove your citizenship? That requires, it requires the state official and the state election commission to come up with a standardized way. They have to sign affidavits. I think that's going to be a mess. But if it becomes law, what that state process looks like is really important. And that's the time that you should be blowing up the state election commission, because what is happening on the Hill right now is Republicans are saying, no, don't worry. We gave an out where the states can fix it, which sounds like shirking your responsibility to me, but whatever. That's the next step in the road is to look at that. So I want to make sure people know first, call your senators. Second, if it becomes law, there is a need for action about what that process looks like at the state level.
And just so y'all watch, she means blowing up by like calling phone calls. Okay. Yes. We know how the opposition will try to use those words against her. All right. Blowing up by phone calls, y'all. Phone calls and emails and those types of things. Yes. Calling them a lot. Yes, all of that there. I got you. I got your back. This, y'all understand, this is a blatant voter disenfranchisement attempt. That's all it is, because of another boogeyman that they created, which is immigrants. They created a boogeyman out of immigrants and they are saying we need to do this to protect our democracy, our republic, all the other stuff there. You've got to be a patriot. This is an attempt at voter disenfranchisement. And this should be everything you need to stand up and get involved.
Perfect. All right, y'all. So Adam from Newberry. President Trump said that he plans to terminate every diversity, equity, and inclusion program across the entire federal government. How could this potentially affect current federal employees?
Well, it's not making people feel good.
Yeah.
So a lot of federal employees these days, a lot of people from DC and Atlanta, as well as federal employees here in South Carolina, and morale is as low as it's ever been in my lifetime. Not just because of these things, but because the administration is treating federal employees like little pieces of crap that the emails that federal employees are receiving from OPM and from administration leadership are condescending, they're insulting, they're unprofessional. And it really, when you've spent 2 decades of your life working as a public servant for not a lot of money to help people be healthier or receive services, and to be treated that way is really harsh. And I think dismantling the DEI programs is very disheartening to people. There were committees to help make things better. All of those committees are gone. Officers they would have diversity officers that helped on things like health equity and the CDC or whatever, that stuff is all gone. And so trying to kind of meet the mission of whatever agency you're in with those tools taken away can be difficult. But I would like to say, and a shout out to federal employees, the people that have not yet been fired, at least, are trying to still meet the mission of the day and to serve American citizens. And if you know federal employees, bring them a basket of cookies. It is a hard time right now.
Yeah.
And they are really doing their best to still get the job done under unbelievable contexts and circumstances to get the job done for the American people. So shout out to federal employees right now.
Yeah, thank y'all for y'all service during this horrific time.
Yeah.
Emil wrote in the chat, what will happen to IEPs if the Department of Education is dismantled at the state level?
That's a good question. That's a good question. And we know that IEPs right now are not even mandated in the private school sector either. So we don't know what's about to happen because they just passed, they've got the voucher thing happening now. And that's one of the things that we tried to put in an amendment when that bill came up, was about making private schools that have IEPs and honor that type of stuff there. We honestly don't know. We don't know what's going to happen in that space. I don't think that our state wants to move toward abolishing the Department of Education here because of the way that these Republicans operate. I have met with Ellen Weaver. I have met with them over there. Oh man. Well, they don't like the fact that I've been beating them up in the media. They ain't like that. They didn't like that at all. They didn't like that. They didn't like that at all about this whole Prager U stuff and all the things that they're doing. But they're sneaky over there. They're sneaky with what they're trying to do. But I don't think this state is going to abolish the Department of Education. I think they're really trying to implement more things, and they need that Department of Education here to do the things. And that was the whole thing that Trump was saying, was giving the education power back to the states, and we would need our Department of Education to handle that in the state.
Scary for me.
Yeah, it is. It is
super scary. Willa put in the chat, if the actions are in contempt of court or illegal. If the actions are in contempt of court or illegal, all of those making the actions are not covered by a blanket immunity. So why are they not being charged accordingly?
Okay, so I'm trying to unpack that a little bit. So there's contempt, which is separate from filed criminal charges. There's also civil and criminal contempt, which I don't think, here's the place to get in the difference of the two. So contempt is something that is the power of the court, not a prosecutor, and it's a power of the court to enforce its own orders. And so what you saw in the Garcia case is the judge has given 2 weeks of discovery, which is the ability to get information to basically determine if they are complying with the court's order. It is time to get depositions of administration officials to get them under oath saying, what have you done? That's the big question. What did you do? So that's contempt. As far as illegal actions and charging, which I hear that as a prosecution thing, it would be like, what criminal statute are we talking about violating? Is it federal or state? So there would be a lot to unpack there. There is illegal in a civil sense, and there is illegal in a criminal sense. So if it violates a criminal statute, then you can be criminally prosecuted and sent to jail. There are things that are illegal under civil law, but they are not criminal. So if you violate a civil law, then you can go to a court and get a court order to change it or to say you can't do this or get an injunction. But the end result of that is not prison time. So that's a difference in the civil criminal context.
All right, from the chat, Rep. Johnson, living with constant anxiety about the state of our civil liberties has taken a real toll on my and others' mental health. As a married LGBT individual, have you heard these sentiments from the from other LGBT constituents? Are there conversations being held by your peers to address the latter, not only about protecting rights, but also to support people who are mentally affected by the political uncertainty? We as a population here in South Carolina feel so vulnerable right now.
Thank you for that question. I absolutely hate that you all and anybody has to go through these situations because I know my daughter, she's 11 years old. And she was watching the debate that I was having on DEI, and she was watching it and seeing all the amendments that we were putting up to protect people and to protect her, and she was watching amendment after amendment get tabled and killed each time. And my wife called me after, and she said, "Your daughter was so upset. She was so sad. She was so hurt." And I don't know if any of you all have, if you have children, you understand that your whole goal and your main purpose in life is to protect your family and to make sure that they don't have to go through the struggles and the situations that you may have had to endure yourself. And that broke my heart to know that my daughter's heart was broke because she is losing faith in the state that is raising her right now. She's losing faith in the future that I am continuously trying to tell her is going to be better for her. And I'm trying very, very hard to make sure that the LGBTQ community, the Black community, the marginalized communities, the women, our elders feel like they have a place to be, a place to exist, a place to speak, and just to be respected. And I'm telling you, there are conversations going on up there. We are having these conversations. We are talking about what more can we do? What more can we say? And if you know anything about me, I'm going to stand up and say it. I'm going to stand up and say it. I don't care who it hurts, who it offends. If it's right, it's right. If it's wrong, it's wrong. And I'm going to call you out on it. And I'm going to make sure that people are held accountable for the actions that they're taking. I don't think a lot of our members up there want to be on the wrong side of history. Some of our Republican members during the DEI stuff even took a walk on those votes because they didn't want to be remembered wrongly by their great-grandchildren who are going to be looking at these things. But I can assure you, people like me are not going away. We are actually growing in number. And I can assure you that we will continue to fight for your dignity, for your liberties, for your freedom. And so you can just have the right to exist without fear of persecution, without fear of, retaliation for you just wanting to live your life. So those conversations are being had, and just know you've got an ally in me.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, I've got a few more questions. I know we're a little over an hour. But Susan, my husband of 36 years passed 2 years ago, and I changed my maiden name to his name when I married him. I'm a naturalized person and was naturalized about 50 years ago. If I move, will I be able to vote?
Yes, but yes, by the way, the SAVE Act is not law yet. So it's not current law. If it passes and becomes law, you can take if the name on your naturalization certificate does not match your current name on an ID, then you're going to be in the same place of a person born here where their birth certificate doesn't match their ID. And so it's going to be in that state process of how do you resolve that discrepancy. The assumption by a lot of people is that states will just take marriage license, but like that's not a given unless we make it a given. And so that's, something we should reach out on that. But right now, that part of voting law has not changed. The other thing that bothers me about the SAVE Act, besides this is what's gotten the most press, but it also does some changes to the Motor Voter Act and being able to register via the DMV. And so I'm really hoping it can die in the Senate again.
Ryan, as a Columbia, South Carolina business operator, do I have any rights or course of action if ICE comes for an employee or a guest?
So if they have a warrant, then you have to obey the warrant. Law enforcement cannot come on your property or do stuff on your property without a warrant. So the question is, you ask for a warrant. In cases of detaining someone, which is different than deportation, as far as ICE being able to detain a person until they figure out whether they can deport, where someone is supposed to have due process, that warrant can be issued by the Attorney General unilaterally. So it's one of the warrants that doesn't have to be issued by a court. So I should always be getting warrants when they want to do this now. And if they have a warrant, you have to comply. If they don't have a warrant, then it's your property. They don't, they don't have stuff to be on that. So that's, you should be asking for a warrant.
Okay, perfect. Jermaine, will you repeat the legislative app you were talking about, tracking bills?
Yes, the SC Legislator app. It's on Google, it's on Apple. You can get it on there, it's free. You can go ahead and download it. SC Legislator app.
Perfect. Gabrielle, can you speak to the Insurrection Act and restoring control of the border in the Blue City states as Trump is threatening on April 20th?
It's a big question. And I don't have the answers here. So the Insurrection Act, the first one was passed in 1807. It's been amended twice. There's 3 different sections on it. And it's about when the federal government can call up National Guard or military for basically domestic civilian purposes. The last time it was amended was immediately post-Civil War, and it was to give the federal government power basically to put down the KKK. And while it made sense at the time, the way it's written is pretty broad and vague. And so there could possibly be a lot of latitude in that. It's to put down rebellion, insurrection. There's like a list of terms. That's how it came about. I don't think it's been amended since the 1800s. That is what he has asked. I think in his order, he asked like the Department of Homeland Security, like, should I use this act to do something? And then could he call up the National Guard to do something? Now, what rebellion or insurrection he's putting down, I think, is a question. I think if he invokes that act, there will undoubtedly be lawsuits. And again, this is the part where I know people hate on lawyers, but right now is when you're glad you have lawyers.
Yeah.
As the saying goes, kill all the lawyers. That wasn't a joke. That was because that's how you get a king in a dictatorship, is you get rid of all the lawyers. So I think the courts are going to be really important there. But yeah, it's scary because no one has invoked it. And what you see the administration doing in a lot of instances is taking these really old statutes that no one thought you could use in this instance, but it's never been tested. So like the Alien Enemies Act that he's using to deport people has never been used outside of like 3 wars and big wars. So like the last time it was used was World War II. And so, it's a question what our Supreme Court will do with those, if they will say. I hope that after we see what he can do with them, that once we have a Democratic majority back in Congress, we maybe fix some of these statutes that haven't been looked at in 200 years. But yeah, I think it's something to watch and put some faith in the courts on some limits. So.
All right, I got like 2 more questions for y'all, because I know we're a little past our hour. Jim from Aiken. In my 8 years living in Aiken, I don't believe my congressman has ever held a town hall. What do you believe is the single best question for his website or call to his office to get his response to what part of diversity or equity or inclusion he finds offensive?
Oh, well, the question that I would pose would be, which part of diversity, equity, inclusion do you think is bad? It's exactly what you wrote there.
The E or the
Yeah. Do you not like the D, the E, the I? Which one is the bad one? You have to just make it plain for these individuals. And I would literally just ask them, just how you asked us, ask that individual the exact same thing. I've been shown that some of my supporters have reached out to other representatives across the state, and they've gotten with some of their constituents and given them some talking points, and they've sent it to them. And one of the representatives actually responded to them and said, "I'm against DEI. DEI is a failed experiment." That's what it said. It's a failed experiment. So, and that's probably what your representative will say, is that it's a failed experiment, but it's not a damn experiment. And that's the thing. It's upsetting to me because they don't even understand what the heck they're talking about. And they just think they're again utilizing this acronym to create a boogeyman, to say that DEI means this person is unqualified, or this person is LGBTQ, or this person is Black. It's like, or this person has a criminal record. It's like, this is what DEI means to them. And that's not what it means at all. It's not what it means.
Define it. And that's the problem.
They won't define it. And I tried to get them to define it, they wouldn't do it.
And in the way that the Trump administration is not defining it legally, because they know they can't, but the way they're trying to spin it is people are being hired not based on merit. It's not fair. And that is not what DEI is. And so one of the examples I use is of a DEI best practice is an interview where you interview a man and a woman, and the man gets interviewed and you talk football for 20 of the 30 minutes. And they're like, "Oh, I like you talk football." Then the woman comes in and you grill the woman for 30 minutes on substance. And then you're trying to compare that and decide who's most qualified. A DEI best practice is that you ask both candidates the same questions so you can actually compare them. That is fairness. DEI is fairness. And so I think part of what you have to do is not just use the term and think that people think what we think it means or but when we do it, we need to be saying it's basic fairness. Basic fairness. I mean, who's against fairness? Right.
Right.
Who's
right.
Actual equality. I'm sorry, do you want to be unequal? And so I think we need to be, when we talk about DEI, we need to be specific in what we talk about. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you think men and women should be asked the same question? Do you think Blacks and whites should have to have the same criteria? Or do you think you should get a pass if I know your daddy and we play football together? When you tell me what's actually fair. So that's my high horse about that, is that I think too many times we let them define terms, take them back. We say DEI is basic fairness. If you're against it, you're against fairness. In this concept that we quotas, they've been illegal the whole time.
Yes. It's been illegal discrimination has been illegal discrimination. It's not changing. It's been legal.
And so
it's frustrating. I know it's absolutely frustrating when you're dealing with this type of stuff, because we like solutions in search of a problem, and I don't get it.
Bandwagon. People are leading. They didn't have a DEI bill until there was a DEI thing in an executive order. Oh, it's the boogeyman.
It's boogeyman. Oh my God.
I think that's a good point to make too, that I feel and you can speak to this, Jermaine, Representative Johnson, that the South Carolina legislature, which is ran by Republicans, is really just really replicating whatever happens in DC.
That is correct. So let me speak to that also. So the bill that was introduced in the federal government for diversity, equity, and inclusion was literally a carbon copy of what they introduced here. And then they found out very quickly that you can't implement stuff on the federal level and do a carbon copy on the state level because it's not going to apply the same. And that's how it came up with the $86 million situation that we had going on of taxpayer funds. And they were like, well, maybe we should look at this thing a little differently and rewrite this thing. They are literally just following what Daddy Trump is saying.
Yeah.
And until they decide to stand up against Daddy, because, the thing that we know is when we grow up, when we mature, when we step out, we leave our parents' home and we start making decisions for ourselves. When are our politicians going to grow up? When are they going to get out from under the thumb of President Musk and co-President Trump and stand up and say, you know what, no more. We're going to do the right thing.
When are you going to ask what is good for our state?
Yes.
Our people.
Yes.
Instead of like jumping on a bandwagon of words that you don't even know what mean. Like, yes.
Right.
So I got two questions, one more for you and one more for Adair. Any idea what the Medicaid cut would potentially look like in South Carolina? That's probably the question. I have two children with disabilities who receive many therapies, all covered by Medicaid, and all of which we would not be able to afford without Medicaid. Would BabyNet be effective? We're very worried.
Yeah, currently, I don't think that they're going to cut Medicaid here because it is I think it's 3/4 of our budget, of our state budget. So we need Medicaid. And I think I just was in a committee the other day and they said 60% of births is covered through Medicaid in South Carolina.
I believe
60%. So essentially, we need Medicaid in the state. We cannot operate without Medicaid in the state. So I don't think it's going to be any cuts to that. Now, the thing that I would like to see is the expansion of Medicaid because we need more individuals to be covered through that. Right now, I think we're like 18th on the list or something with Medicaid in the U.S. And we need to do more. We absolutely need to do more. But I don't think we're going to keep doing any cuts to Medicaid.
Perfect. Last question for you, Adair. Terry, could the president be charged with treason instead of impeachment? And could we do that instead?
So it would still be impeachment. So the way the impeachment works is it's not just removal for office. You can use impeachment as a trial for a crime. So like the House acts as a prosecutor and the House would have to indict. They do it by a vote to impeach. And you can be impeached for treason, high crimes. I forget the exact language in the Constitution, but it would be one and the same. And then the Senate acts as the trial. And so the House comes in as the prosecutor and tries the case in front of the Senate. And then the Senate votes whether to convict or not, essentially, and remove from office. So that's the way it works. And I saw a question somewhere, like, is there a way for a citizen to impeach? No.
Yeah.
It has to be Congress. It has to be Congress. An individual citizen cannot do it. So yeah, that's the way it looks like. The court has been, as a separation of powers issue, has been pretty consistent that you can't charge or try a sitting president outside of impeachment, like a court could not, or a state attorney general couldn't come charge a sitting president. And so that's, if something were to happen to a sitting president, it would happen via impeachment in Congress. What he can be charged for when he's not a sitting president is a separate question. So it's a time issue, not necessarily a forever.
Right.
The immunity Supreme Court decision is like a whole other conversation other day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. And we got a lot of questions, y'all. Try to get to as many as we could. I got a lot of great comments. Just thanking the two of you. This is a great job you're doing. Thank you so much for doing this for us. A lot of questions about, will you run for office again? Will you run for higher office? I didn't blame y'all. We got a lot of questions asking that, and I'll share those with y'all later. And questions about candidate recruitment. Just so you guys know, I am and other party leaders are actively recruiting folks to run for higher office. Next year is going to be a big year for South Carolina. We will have our gubernatorial election. Harry McMasters cannot serve another term, so the governor's seat will be open. The attorney general seat will be open. The superintendent of education will be open. The treasurer, all those seats will be, not all of them will be open, but they are going to be on the ballot. And also Lindsey Graham's seat is also up next year as well. So we're working really hard to find great candidates to run for those offices. So just know that we're just not sitting here waiting to be caught flat-footed. We're actively working to recruit candidates. That came up a couple times in the chat. But thank y'all so very much for tuning in and supporting us. I hope these are helpful. We work really hard to try to find experts and people who have working knowledge about what's happening right now in real time. And it's our goal to provide as much factual information for you as possible and just to give you a vehicle to, to get information. So thanks again. Stay tuned. Like I said, next week we have in-person town halls in Spartanburg and in Beaufort. So if you're there or if you're close by, come make sure that you register to come and get the location and to hear what we have to say at those town halls. And I'll see you guys